The first laugh came when my factory badge hit the dinner table. Not hard, just enough for everyone to notice it. My son-in-law's mother picked it up between two fingers, like it was something dirty left on a white tablecloth. "Did you come from your shift?" she asked. Her husband chuckled. "If we keep him too long, do we owe the factory overtime?" A few people laughed. My son-in-law raised his glass and smiled like he had been waiting for the perfect moment. "Every family needs a reminder of where we started," he said. Then he looked straight at me. "Old floor labor." I looked at my daughter. She didn't laugh, but she looked away. That was the part I remembered most. Not the joke. Not the room. Her eyes leaving mine. I was 69 years old, wearing a badge that had survived layoffs, shutdown scares, safety audits, and men walking out of that plant with bandaged hands. They thought it proved I was beneath them. They didn't know it still opened doors my son-in-law had been trying to keep closed. Welcome back to Final Act Revenge. Please take care of your health while listening, because some stories are heavy for anyone who has ever been judged by honest work. Then the union president stepped into the room with a settlement folder under his arm. And suddenly, nobody was laughing at my badge anymore. My name's Aaron Clark. I have lived long enough to know that some people don't look down on a man because he is weak. They look down on him because they mistake quiet for empty. I was born in northern Indiana, in a house where the furnace rattled all winter, and my mother stretched grocery money like it was a magic trick. My father fixed farm equipment until his hands looked older than the rest of him. He used to say, "A clean shirt doesn't prove clean work, son. Look at the hands." So I learned early. Work leaves marks. Oil under the nails, scars across the knuckles, a back that knows rain before the weather report does. I was 19 when I first stepped onto a factory floor. Back then, I thought the machines were the loudest things in the building. I was wrong. The loudest thing was fear. Fear of layoffs, fear of injury, fear of missing one paycheck and watching a whole family slide backward. I started as a floor mechanic, fixing jammed conveyors and press lines that older men swore had personalities. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, anything they gave me. I learned which sounds meant a bearing was dying, which smells meant insulation was burning, and which managers only showed up when someone important was visiting. That factory badge came later. Just a piece of plastic, people think. A photo, a name, a number. But to me, it meant I could enter places where men were tired, scared, proud, and still showing up because children needed shoes, and mortgages didn't care about back pain. My wife Janet understood that better than anyone. She worked as a counselor at a vocational high school. She spent her life telling young people that learning a trade was not a consolation prize. It was dignity with tools in its hands. Janet used to laugh at me because I read maintenance manuals like other men read mystery novels. She'd say, "Aaron, if that book had a kiss scene, you'd still be checking the torque specs." That woman could make me laugh, even when I came home with metal dust in my hair and bad news in my pockets. She also gave me the one rule I tried to live by after I started doing better. "If people only respect you after they know what you own," she told me once, "they are not respecting you. They are respecting the danger." That sentence stayed with me, because over the years, I did do better. I went to night school, got certified in safety systems, became a supervisor, then compliance. Then, after enough hard years and a few lucky decisions, I became one of the controlling partners behind Clark Allied Systems. We did equipment service, audit support, safety documentation, maintenance tracking. Not glamorous work, but necessary. The kind of work that keeps machines certified, lines running, and workers alive when people upstairs start pretending speed is the same thing as leadership. I never led with that part of myself. Not with my in-laws. Not with Cole. Not even much with Jenna. Maybe that was pride. Maybe it was Janet's voice still sitting on my shoulder. I wanted to be treated like a father, not like a signature on a contract. I wanted my daughter's husband to respect the man who raised her, not the man who could interrupt his career with one phone call. So I let them think the badge was only memory, a harmless old habit. something a retired factory man couldn't quite put down. But that afternoon, before the promotion dinner, my phone buzzed with an automated plant alert I had not seen in months. Safety override logged. Press line 4B. I was already dressed for dinner, but I drove to Hawthorne Components first. Just 20 minutes, I told myself. That was all it took to see Cole Dutton's name attached to the override approval. So when he called me old floor labor later that night, I already knew one thing he didn't. Press line 4B had recorded his name before he ever raised that glass. The dinner kept moving after they laughed at my badge. That was the strange part. Nobody stopped the music. Nobody pushed back their chair and said, "That was cruel." The waiter still poured water. Forks still touched plates. Somebody at the far end of the table kept talking about golf like a man hadn't just been cut open politely in front of his daughter. That is how humiliation works in certain rooms. It doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes wrapped in good wine, soft lighting, and people pretending a joke did not leave blood on the table. Cole stood near the head of the private dining room, holding his glass like a man already practicing for a bigger stage. His suit was perfect. His smile was controlled. Even the way he nodded at people felt rehearsed. Diane looked proud enough to glow. Roy sat beside her, still amused by his own little overtime joke. And Jenna kept smoothing the napkin in her lap, over and over. That hurt more than anything Cole said, because I knew that habit. She did it as a child whenever she broke something and didn't want to confess. Cole tapped his glass gently. "Before dessert," he said, "I just want to thank everyone who came tonight. This promotion means a lot to our family." Our family. Interesting phrase. People like Cole use family when they want warmth around ambition. He went on about discipline, efficiency, hard calls, and keeping Hawthorne Components competitive while costs kept climbing. He talked about supply chain pressure, labor instability, and the need to trim waste before waste trims us. A few corporate people nodded. Diane dabbed at the corner of her eye like her son had just saved a hospital. But I heard something else. I heard a man translating human exhaustion into spreadsheet language. Waste. That word stayed with me. Because in plants, men like Cole rarely call broken machines waste. They call workers waste. They call bathroom breaks waste. They call a man staying 20 minutes late to reset a line commitment when they don't want to pay him. Cole raised his glass higher. "I came from nothing," he said, "and I promised myself I would never stay where I started." Diane smiled toward me then, not openly, just enough. Roy leaned toward the man beside him and muttered, "Some people move up, some people clock in." The table chuckled again. I looked down at my badge. Old photo, scratched corner, faded company logo. A small piece of plastic carrying more honest work than every polished laugh in that room. Jenna finally touched my sleeve under the table. "Dad," she whispered, "please, not tonight. Cole worked hard for this." I turned toward her slowly. "I know what hard work looks like, Jenna." Her eyes softened, but she still did not look at the others. "He's under pressure," she said. "So are the men underneath him." She pulled her hand back. That was the moment I knew my daughter was not choosing cruelty. She was choosing comfort. Sometimes that hurts worse. Across the room, my granddaughter Nell stood near the doorway with her phone in hand. She had been filming little clips all evening for some school theater project about adults celebrating milestones. She was 15, bright, quiet, and too observant for her own peace. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. She had heard enough to understand something was wrong, even if she couldn't name it yet. Cole stepped away from the table after his toast, laughing with the vendor near the wine cabinet. I watched him lean close and speak low, but not low enough. "Men like Aaron don't understand upstairs decisions," he said. "They just know the floor." The vendor gave a polite laugh. Nell's phone, Sumban Shinam, was still recording. I didn't know that yet. But I saw her expression change. A child's face tells the truth before adults remember how. Then Paige Dutton left the table. Cole's sister. She had been quiet most of the night, checking her phone under the table, her face tight every time Cole mentioned clean operations. Paige worked in HR at Hawthorne, and unlike Diane or Roy, she looked less proud than afraid. I stood a minute later and stepped into the hallway, pretending I needed water. That was when I heard her voice around the corner. "No, Tyler cannot file that claim before Monday," Paige said sharply into her phone. "Cole said the file has to be clean before the announcement." Tyler, claim, clean file. 3 words can change the temperature of a hallway. I stayed still. Paige lowered her voice. "I don't care what the nurse wrote. If that injury report goes in before the VP packet, it becomes exposure." Exposure. Not pain, not safety. Exposure. I looked back toward the private dining room. Cole was smiling beneath warm lights while people applauded him for saving money. And somewhere behind that applause, a young worker named Tyler was being turned into paperwork. Paige ended the call and came around the corner. When she saw me, her face went pale. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. Then she forced a thin smile. "Mr. Clark, I didn't know anyone was out here." I looked at her carefully. "No," I said quietly. "I imagine that was the problem." She walked past me without another word, but her hands were shaking. When I returned to the table, Cole was accepting another round of congratulations. Diane was telling someone that leadership runs in the family. Roy lifted his drink at me like we were old friends. I sat down slowly. The laughter sounded different now, not louder, less human. Because once you hear machines behind a celebration, you cannot unhear them. And that was when I stopped listening to what Cole said he had earned and started wondering who had paid for it. I did not go home after the dinner. I sat in my truck outside the steakhouse for nearly 10 minutes, watching people leave through the front doors with their coats buttoned and their faces still warm from expensive food. Diane walked out first, laughing about something Roy said. Cole followed with one hand on Jenna's back, smiling like a man who had survived his own performance. My daughter looked tired. Not cruel, that was the problem. Cruelty is easier to understand when it announces itself. Tired silence is harder. It can look like kindness from a distance, even while it leaves someone bleeding. I started the truck and drove toward Hawthorne Components. The plant sat on the east side of Fort Wayne, beyond a stretch of warehouses, gas stations, and small houses with porch lights still on. At night, the whole place glowed under yellow security lamps, like an animal that never fully slept. Factories have their own weather. Heat near the press lines, cold near the loading bays, metal dust in the air, that low mechanical hum that gets into a man's bones if he stands near it long enough. I parked near the employee entrance. For a moment, I looked at the badge lying in my cup holder. The same badge they had laughed at less than an hour earlier. Scratched plastic, faded photo. A clip that didn't hold straight anymore. Then I picked it up and walked to the side gate. The scanner blinked red once, then green. The lock clicked. I almost smiled, not because I wanted to prove anything, because old doors remember old hands. The night guard, a heavyset man named Carl, looked up from his desk and frowned. "Mr. Clark, didn't expect to see you tonight." "Neither did I." He glanced at my badge. "Still opens? Only the doors people forget are important." Carl did not laugh. Men who work nights know when a sentence is carrying more than it says. I signed the visitor log and headed toward press line 4B. The air grew warmer as I moved through the corridor. Somewhere ahead, machinery thudded in steady intervals, like a giant heart nobody trusted but everyone depended on. Near the break room, I saw him. Tyler Boone, 26 years old maybe, thin face, work boots, still dusty. Right hand wrapped in white bandage from wrist to knuckles. He sat alone at a small table under flickering fluorescent lights. In front of him lay a packet of papers. His left hand held a pen. His bandaged hand rested on the table like something that no longer fully belonged to him. I stopped in the doorway. Tyler looked up quickly. "Sir, I'm not supposed to be back here after shift." "That makes 2 of us," I said. He tried to smile, but fear got there first. I walked closer and looked at the top page. Employee Corrective Statement. Below that, in clean legal language, it said, Tyler Boone failed to follow lockout procedure and accepted responsibility for personal injury caused by operator negligence. Operator negligence. I have seen that phrase ruin lives. It sounds technical enough that nobody pictures a young man sitting alone, wondering whether his next signature will cost him a job, a claim, and maybe the use of 2 fingers. Did you write this? I asked. Tyler shook his head. They said it's better if I sign. Who said? He looked toward the hallway. That was an answer, too. I lowered my voice. What happened on line 4B? His jaw tightened. The guard stuck twice before lunch. I reported it. To who? My supervisor. He said production couldn't stop again. We were already behind. And then? Tyler swallowed. After break, the sensor blinked. I reached in to clear a jam because the reset light showed safe. Then the plate dropped early. He looked down at his bandaged hand. For a second, he was not a worker. He was just somebody's son trying not to cry in a break room. They told me if I sign this, I can keep my job, he said. And if you don't? Tyler stared at the paper. No answer. I picked up the statement and read the final page. Voluntary acknowledgement, no further claim, no dispute of internal findings. I felt something old and hard rise inside me, the kind of anger I had spent years training into patience. Then I noticed the attached machine report. Press line 4B, safety guard alert, manual override, approved by operations. I already knew whose name would be there before I turned the page. Cole Dutton, the same man who had raised a glass and called me old floor labor, the same man whose promotion dinner was still probably winding down while Tyler sat under bad lights being asked to sign away the truth. I placed the papers back on the table. Do not sign this tonight. Tyler's eyes widened. If I don't, they'll say I refused cooperation. Let them. I need this job. I know. That was why the paper was on the table. Not because Tyler was guilty, because scared people sign faster. A supervisor appeared at the break room door then. I recognized him vaguely, one of Cole's floor men. Mr. Clark, he said, too carefully, this is an internal matter. I looked at him. A man's hand is not an internal matter. His face tightened. We're just closing documentation before Monday. Before Monday. There it was again. The same invisible deadline Paige had mentioned on the phone. Clean file. No claim, no exposure. I took my badge off and set it beside Tyler's statement. The supervisor looked at it like he suddenly remembered plastic can have memory. Tell whoever sent you, I said quietly, that I want the original safety log for press line 4B preserved. He did not move, so I added, now. After he left, Tyler stared at the badge. You still work here? I looked around the break room, the vending machine buzzing, the stained table, the old safety poster peeling at one corner. No, I said. But part of me never stopped watching. I walked to the maintenance terminal near the hallway and scanned my badge again. Green. The screen opened into archive access. I searched press line 4B. The current report showed operator error, clean, simple, convenient. Then I pulled the backup history. There it was, a line marked Review Pending. I clicked it. The original alert loaded slowly. Safety guard fault detected. Manual override confirmed. Original safety alert deleted. For a moment, the whole plant seemed to quiet around me. Cole had not just laughed at the floor. He had been rewriting what happened on it. By sunrise, I had not slept. I drove home from Hawthorne with Tyler's face still sitting in my mind. Not his injury, his fear. There is a certain look working people get when they are trying to calculate how much dignity they can afford to keep. I had seen it before in men older than me, women tougher than most supervisors, fathers standing beside broken machines wondering if one more complaint would cost them the mortgage. Tyler had that look, and Cole had learned how to use it. The next morning, I returned to the plant just after shift change. The parking lot was full of tired bodies, moving between pickup trucks and security doors. Some workers carried lunch pails. Some walked with coffee. A few just stared at the ground like the day had already taken something before it began. Near the west entrance, I saw Linda Carver, 61 years old, line lead, 28 years at Hawthorne Components. Linda had the kind of face that made Liz feel uncomfortable standing nearby. She wore steel-toe boots, a faded union jacket, and the expression of a woman who had outlasted 3 plant managers, 2 ownership changes, and more motivational posters than any human being should be asked to endure. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just said, "Took you long enough, Aaron?" That almost made me laugh. Almost. "You knew I'd come?" "I knew press line 4B would get your attention." We walked toward the old tool crib, where the noise from the floor dropped just enough for people to speak without shouting. Linda poured coffee from a dented thermos and handed me the cup before I asked. It tasted terrible. Factory coffee often does, but it was honest. Linda leaned against a metal cabinet. "Tyler didn't cause that injury." "I know." "No," she said. "You saw one report. I'm telling you the pattern." Pattern. That word always mattered. One mistake can be explained. A pattern has parents. Linda pulled a key from her pocket and opened her locker. Inside, beneath a folded raincoat and a pair of gloves, sat a thick envelope wrapped in 2 rubber bands. She placed it in my hands. It was heavier than paper should feel. "What is this?" "Ours," she said. I looked at her. "Whose ours?" "Everybody's." Inside were copies of handwritten shift notes, screenshots, text messages, clock-in slips, and pages covered with names I recognized from the floor. 31 workers, some missing 20 minutes here, some 45 there. Some entire weekend adjustments shaved down with words like readiness time, voluntary reset, team commitment. That last one made my stomach tighten. Team commitment. A phrase invented by someone who never had to choose between paying for medicine and filling a gas tank. Linda watched me read. "They called it the efficiency recovery window," she said. Made it sound like a scheduling strategy. "What was it?" She gave me a tired smile. "Unpaid work, wearing a tie." I kept turning pages. Workers asked to show up before their shift to prep lines. Workers kept after shift to reset machines. Workers told not to clock overtime unless a supervisor approved it, but the same supervisors were judged on labor cost reduction. A beautiful little trap, elegant in the way cruel systems can be elegant. Linda pointed to one name. "See this one? Eddie Shaw. $287 short across 3 pay periods. His wife uses insulin." She flipped another page. "Maria Voss, single mother, lost almost 6 hours last month. She told me she stopped buying meat for dinners because she thought payroll would fix itself." Then she tapped Tyler Boone's record. Tyler was trying to get into a night apprenticeship program. One disciplinary mark could kill his recommendation. That landed hard, because Cole was not just taking hours. He was stealing futures in small, deniable pieces. I looked through the papers again, slower this time. The numbers weren't random. They were trimmed carefully. Low enough that each worker might doubt themselves. High enough to save real money across a line. That was how people like Cole survived. They didn't rob one person loudly. They shaved many people quietly. Linda folded her arms. "I sent Mason Briggs part of this. The union president? He's got copies. But he needs system confirmation. Payroll can call my papers personal notes unless someone pulls the backup logs." My hand moved instinctively to the badge clipped inside my jacket. Linda saw it. "That little piece of plastic still gets you where we can't go, doesn't it? Some places. Then go there." For a second, she was not asking. She was speaking for every person who had learned to swallow less pay because complaining felt dangerous. I looked down at Tyler's time card. Original shift note, 11.6 hours. Payroll record, 8.0 hours. Beneath the adjustment line was a note, adjusted per operations directive, C.D. Cole Dutton. Initials can look small until they start appearing under other people's lost money. My jaw tightened. Linda noticed. "Don't get dramatic on me," she said. "Get accurate." That was Linda. A woman could hand you evidence of a company bleeding workers and still remind you not to make a mess of the facts. I slid the documents back into the envelope. "Does Cole know you kept these?" If he did, I'd already be on a performance improvement plan for breathing incorrectly. I did laugh then. A small one, the kind that comes out because the alternative is rage. Before I left, Linda stopped me near the tool crib door. "There's something else." Of course there was. She handed me a folded copy of Tyler's time card. "This is the one they'll try to bury first." I opened it. Same shift. Same date. Same missing hours. But in the corner, someone had written a note beside Tyler's name, pending corrective statement before claim review. My stomach turned cold. By morning, Cole would not just be stealing time, he would try to make Tyler sign away the proof. The next morning, I arrived at Hawthorne before the first office lights warmed up. Factories look different before executives arrive. No polished speeches. No framed values on conference room walls. No talk about culture from people who never smell the oil. Just workers walking in with lunch bags, stiff backs, tired eyes, and the quiet courage of people who cannot afford to fall apart on a weekday. Linda was waiting near the west entrance with a paper cup of coffee and the expression of a woman who had already decided patience was overrated. "They moved Tyler's meeting up," she said. "When?" "Now." That one word tightened my chest. We walked through the hallway near HR, where the carpet started replacing concrete and the walls began pretending the factory was cleaner than it was. Through the glass of a small conference room, I saw Tyler Boone sitting at the table. His right hand was still wrapped in white bandage. The paper in front of him was thicker now. Not just a corrective statement, a waiver, a voluntary separation option, a medical claim acknowledgement. And beside him sat Paige Dutton, Cole's sister, with a pen laid neatly across the top page like a loaded weapon nobody wanted to call dangerous. Cole stood near the window in a gray suit. Same perfect posture, same calm face, same man who had called me old floor labor in front of my daughter and then gone back to hiding injuries behind clean words. I could hear his voice through the cracked door. "Tyler, nobody is trying to hurt you here. We're trying to protect your future." That sentence made my hand close around the folder Linda had given me. Protect your future. People say that when they are asking you to surrender it. Tyler looked down at the papers. "My mom's prescriptions are due Friday," he said quietly. "If I sign this, do I still have insurance?" Paige looked at Cole. Cole did not answer right away. That pause was the ugliest thing in the room. Finally, he said, "We can discuss transition options." Transition. There it was again. Corporate language wrapped around a man's fear. Tyler's bandaged fingers shook as he tried to hold the pen. I opened the door. Every face turned. Cole's eyes narrowed first. Paige went pale. Tyler looked relieved and terrified at the same time. "Mr. Clark," Cole said carefully, "this is an internal HR matter." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "No," I said. "This is a young man being asked to trade his hand for silence." Cole's mouth tightened. "You have no role in this meeting." I walked to the table and placed my factory badge beside Tyler's paperwork. The plastic clicked softly against the wood. Not loud, but everybody heard it. Cole looked at the badge like he hated it more each time it appeared. I turned to Tyler. "Have you spoken to a union representative?" "No, sir." "Have you been given time to review these papers with anyone outside this room?" He shook his head. Cole cut in. "This is standard procedure." I looked at the waiver. Standard procedure doesn't usually need a worker to sign 3 documents before breakfast. Paige lowered her eyes. That told me something. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Cole took one step closer. "Aaron, this plant is under pressure. You know how things work. Delays cost money. False claims cost money. Bad documentation costs money." I felt my patience break then. Not loudly, not completely, but enough I pressed my palm against the table and leaned toward him. A man's hand is not a line item. For a moment, the room held still. Tyler looked at me like he had been waiting for one adult to say what he had not been allowed to say himself. Cole's face hardened. "You're making this personal." "You did that at dinner." His jaw flexed. I saw Paige glance at him then, quick and nervous, like she was afraid of what he might say next. "Before I tell you what was hidden behind Tyler's injury report, let me ask you something. If your family mocked the work that fed them, and then you found out someone younger was being crushed by the same arrogance, would you stay quiet to keep peace, or would you risk everything to expose it? Tell me honestly what you would have done." Because I had kept peace for a long time. Too long, maybe. I kept it when Diane treated my badge like a joke. I kept it when Roy laughed about overtime. I kept it when Jenna looked away. I kept it when Cole called honest work something people should climb above. But watching Tyler sit there with a bandaged hand and a pen he was afraid to put down, that was different. That was not disrespect anymore. That was machinery. The kind that grinds people quietly and calls the sound efficiency. I picked up the waiver and read the first paragraph aloud. "Employee voluntarily acknowledges that no mechanical defect contributed to the incident." Then I looked at Cole. Press line 4B logged a safety guard fault before Tyler was injured. Cole didn't blink. That log was preliminary. It was deleted. It was corrected. By who? Silence. There are questions guilty men hate because the answer already exists somewhere with a timestamp. Paige shifted in her chair. Cole noticed. "Paige," he said quietly, warning inside her name. She froze. That was when I knew fear had been sitting in more than one chair. I turned back to Tyler. "Do not sign anything today." Cole laughed once, low and sharp. "You cannot advise him." "No," I said, "but I can tell him not to sign away a claim before a union rep and a compliance attorney review the original safety logs." Paige's hand moved slightly toward the folder in front of her. Barely, but I saw it. A thin blue folder underneath the waiver packet. 6 tabs, not 1. 6. My eyes stayed on it long enough for Paige to notice. Her lips parted, then closed again. Cole grabbed the folder before she could move. "This meeting is over," he said. "For Tyler? For you." I nodded slowly. Then I picked up my badge from the table. "Good. Then preserve every injury-related report tied to press line 4B for the last 14 months. Cole's face changed, only a fraction. But I had spent my life listening for small changes before machines failed. I knew the sound of pressure rising. Tyler stood slowly, still unsure whether he was allowed to leave. I opened the door for him. Linda was waiting outside. She put one hand gently on his shoulder and led him down the hall without saying a word. I started to follow, but Paige stepped into the hallway behind me. "Mr. Clark," her voice was barely above a whisper. I turned. She looked back toward the conference room where Cole was still gathering papers too quickly. Then she said, "If you're pulling that file, pull all 6. I stared at her. "All 6 what?" Her face tightened like she regretted speaking before the words were finished. "All 6 injury reports." Then she glanced back once more and added, "Cole knows which ones." That was when I understood Paige wasn't warning me away from the truth. She was telling me where it had been buried. By the time I left that hallway, I had 2 choices. I could pretend Paige had said nothing, go home, and let Cole's version of the truth become official before the week was over. Or I could pull the thread until the whole clean little story came apart. At my age, you learn something about peace. Peace is not always quiet. Sometimes quiet is just fear wearing church clothes. So I called Mason Briggs. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding like a man who had been expecting bad news for years. "Mason," I said, "how much proof do you need before a settlement becomes something they cannot bury?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Depends who is handing me the proof." "Me." Another pause. Longer this time. I'll meet you in 20 minutes. We met at a diner across from the plant, the kind with cracked red booths, burnt coffee, and waitresses who call everybody sweetheart without asking permission. Mason Briggs sat in the back corner with a union folder already open. He was 57, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and calm in that dangerous way men get when they have been underestimated too many times. He did not shake my hand right away. He looked at my badge first, then at my face. Men with money usually remember workers when they need applause, he said. I understood that. I even respected it. So I slid Linda's envelope across the table. Then don't trust my money. He opened it. Trust the logs. For the next 40 minutes, Mason read, without speaking much, Tyler's time card, Linda's shift notes, the overtime adjustments, the press line 4B safety alert, the deleted original report. The note page had whispered about 6 injury files. His face didn't change often. But when he saw Tyler's payroll shift cut from 11.6 hours to 8.0, his jaw moved once. That was enough. This is bigger than one injury, he said. Yes. You understand what happens if we move too early? I do. They'll call it family drama. They already made it family drama when Cole used my daughter's silence as table decoration. Mason looked at me then, really looked. Not like a businessman, not like an old man, not like a badge somebody had laughed at, like a witness. We need system backup, he said. Not copies, not memories, not handwritten notes. If Hawthorne's lawyers smell emotion, they'll bury this under procedure. I nodded. That's why I called Susan Bell. Susan arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the expression of a woman who had never once confused urgency with sloppiness. She was Clark Allied Systems' independent compliance attorney. Sharp eyes, calm voice, no wasted movement. Susan sat down, scanned the table, and said, "Before anyone gets righteous, tell me what you can prove legally." I liked Susan for that. Moral outrage is useful for getting people out of chairs. Evidence is what keeps them standing. I explained the badge access, the automated alert, the backup archive, the fact that Cole likely did not know certain compliance records were mirrored outside the ordinary operations system. Mason leaned back. You still have access to that room? I pulled the badge from my coat pocket. The cracked plastic caught the diner light. They thought this was sentimental. Susan studied it. And is it? Yes, I said. But not only that. We waited until after administrative staff cleared out for the evening. Then the 3 of us drove back to Hawthorne. The plant at night felt different when you were no longer just looking for answers. It felt like something waiting to confess. Carl, the night guard, saw Mason and Susan behind me and stood straighter. Mr. Clark? They're with me. He glanced at my badge, then opened the visitor log without another question. Some men know when history is walking through the door. We moved past the main floor, down a service corridor most employees never used. The walls were plain concrete, no posters, no corporate slogans, just utility pipes, electrical panels, and that deep hum of systems doing their work without recognition. At the end of the corridor was a gray door with no nameplate, only a small scanner. Mason looked at it. What's in there? Memory, I said. Then I scanned my badge. For 1 second, nothing happened. I felt Susan glance at me. Then the light turned green. The lock clicked open. Mason exhaled quietly. Inside was the compliance archive room. Not impressive to look at. Metal racks, backup terminals, locked storage cabinets, climate control humming overhead. A small desk with an old monitor and a keyboard nobody had replaced because the system still worked better than most new things. But that room mattered, because some records are kept away from people who benefit when records disappear. Susan put on gloves before touching anything. Chain of custody starts now, she said. Mason opened a fresh evidence log. I sat at the terminal and entered my credentials. The system recognized me slower than it used to, but it recognized me. Press line 4B. I pulled the current report first. Operator error. Clean language. No mention of the stuck guard. No mention of the blinking sensor. No mention of Cole's override approval before Tyler's injury. Then I pulled backup version history. There it was. Original safety guard fault. Manual override confirmed. Operator warning active. Report modified after incident. Susan leaned closer. Export it. I did. Then we searched the other 5 injury files Paige had mentioned. Everyone had the same smell. Different names, different dates, same pattern. A warning downgraded. A report softened. An injury reframed. A worker statement corrected before review. Corrected. That word can hide a lot of sins. Mason stood behind me, silent now. Then Drew Miller appeared at the archive door. The IT tech looked like he had aged 10 years since breakfast. His badge hung crooked. His hair was damp from either sweat or rain. "I saw the archive room access ping," he said. Susan turned immediately. "Are you here to interfere?" Drew shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm here because I'm tired of pretending computers don't gossip better than church ladies." Mason almost smiled. Drew stepped inside and pointed at the login history. "That pattern there? That isn't an automatic correction. Someone used elevated operations credentials after shift close. Same window every time." "Cole?" I asked. "Sometimes Cole. Sometimes a supervisor under him. But the approvals route back to his authority group." Susan recorded everything. Drew swallowed hard. "I didn't say anything before because I've got 2 kids and a mortgage." "No judgment," I said. He looked relieved, then guilty again. "There's more." Of course there was. He pulled up a payroll adjustment folder linked to the same operations group. 31 names. Linda's list matched the system, not close, exactly. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The room felt smaller. Not because of the machines, because truth takes up space once it stops hiding. Susan printed the audit packet. Page after page slid out in clean white sheets. Safety overrides, payroll adjustments, injury report revisions, access logs, approval trails. At the top of the summary page, the system generated an exposure estimate. Potential wage and safety settlement exposure. $2.35 million plus. Mason picked up that first page slowly. His voice was quiet. "This is enough to make them read it aloud." I looked down at my badge resting beside the keyboard. Hours earlier, it had been a joke at a dinner table. Now it had opened the room where upstairs kept its lies. For the first time since that dinner, I understood something I should have remembered sooner. The badge had not survived to remind me who I used to be. It had survived to finish what I started. I thought finding the audit room would make me feel stronger. It didn't. Proof has a strange weight. Before you have it, you can still pretend there might be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a bad manager under pressure, a few mistakes stacked too close together. But once the records sit in front of you, once the names, times, injuries, deleted alerts, and missing wages line up in black ink, you lose the comfort of doubt. By the next evening, Cole was already moving faster than we expected. That was his gift. He knew how to smell danger before it reached the conference room. Linda called me first. "They're pushing Tyler." I was standing in my kitchen, still wearing the same jacket from the night before. "What do you mean?" "He got a severance packet. Signed today. Money by Friday." My hand tightened around the phone. Tyler's mother needed prescriptions. Cole knew that. Of course he knew that. A man like Cole didn't just pressure people. He studied where they could not afford to resist. Linda lowered her voice. "Aaron, if that boy signs, they'll bury the injury claim under voluntary separation." I looked at the factory badge lying on the counter. For years, I had kept my power quiet because I did not want people confusing fear with respect. But there is another danger in hiding power too long. The wrong people start believing nobody can stop them. An hour later, Jenna called. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, my daughter said, "Dad, I saw the post." "What post?" She hesitated. That hesitation already hurt. I opened my phone while she stayed silent. Diane had posted photos from Cole's promotion dinner. The caption read, So proud to finally see our family among real leadership. I stared at the main picture. Cole in the center, Diane smiling, Roy with one hand raised around a glass, Jenna beside them, tired but still there. And me? I had been cropped almost completely out. Almost. At the far left edge of the image, you could still see the black strap of my factory badge hanging near the table. Not my face, not my hands. Just the badge they had laughed at. I sat down slowly. Funny how people can erase you and still leave evidence of what they hated. Someone had commented underneath, "Is that Aaron at the edge?" Diane replied, "Oh, just an old plant friend. Old plant friend, not Jenna's father, not family. Not the man whose work had helped keep that plant certified through 2 recessions and more shutdown scares than Cole had ever survived. Just an old plant friend." Jenna spoke softly. "I didn't write that." "No," I said. "You only liked it." Her breathing changed. "I didn't think—" "That is the problem, Jenna." The line went quiet. I didn't want to hurt my daughter. God help me, I didn't. But there are moments when protecting someone from shame only teaches them to keep avoiding truth. She started crying then. Not loudly. Jenna never cried loudly. "Dad, I heard Cole say things before." I closed my eyes. "What things?" Another pause. "He called you useful. An old plant contact. He said you were good to keep around because people on the floor still trusted you." That sentence entered me slowly. Not like a knife, like cold water. "So you knew." "I didn't know all of it." "But you knew enough." She didn't answer, and silence, once again, became the cruelest language in my family. "I was trying to keep peace," she whispered. I looked at the cropped photo on my phone, the badge strap at the edge, my absence made convenient. "You protected your marriage," I said quietly, "by letting them make your father small." Jenna sobbed once. I hated myself for saying it. But I did not take it back. Outside my kitchen window, evening settled over Fort Wayne in a dull gray sheet. Across the street, a neighbor's porch light flickered on. Ordinary life continued in small domestic movements, while mine felt like a machine running with the guard removed. I hung up gently. No slammed phone, no shouting. Just the sound of a father realizing his daughter had learned to look away long before that dinner. At 11:40 that night, I sat in my pickup outside Hawthorne Components. The plant lights glowed over the parking lot. Trucks rolled in and out. Shift workers moved through the cold with their collars raised and lunch bags pressed against their sides. I held the badge in my palm. The plastic was warm from my hand. For 40 years, I wore some version of that badge so people could go home safe. So lines could run without swallowing hands. So reports told the truth, even when truth was expensive. And there I was, wondering if humility had become its own kind of cowardice. Maybe Janet had been right that respect bought with power is not respect. But maybe I had forgotten the other half. Power hidden too long can become permission for the worst person in the room. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Clark?" The voice was shaking. "Paige?" She exhaled like she had been holding her breath all day. "I'm in the south parking lot. Please don't tell Cole I called." I looked toward the far end of the lot. A small sedan sat under a broken lamp near the employee smoking area. "What is this about?" "He's trying to bury it." I sat straighter. "Bury what?" "The settlement exposure. Tyler's claim. The overtime list. All of it." Paige's voice cracked on the last words. "He wants Tyler to sign a resignation package before tomorrow's reception. If Tyler signs, Cole can say the injury issue was resolved voluntarily." "And the wage claims?" "He's calling them preliminary discrepancies." Of course he was. Every ugly thing sounds smaller after someone upstairs renames it. Paige continued quickly. "There's an internal memo. I have a copy. It says the labor file needs to be clean before the VP announcement." VP announcement. So the promotion dinner had only been the warm-up. The real prize was bigger. Cole wasn't just protecting his new title. He was trying to walk into a vice president track with 31 underpaid workers, 6 softened injury reports, and 1 injured young man sealed inside paperwork. I opened my truck door and stepped into the cold. Paige met me halfway across the lot. She wore a long coat over office clothes, but her hair was loose and her face had none of the polished Dutton confidence I had seen at dinner. She looked scared and guilty. She handed me a folder. Inside were copies of emails, an HR memo, a severance draft, and a list of names matching Linda's envelope. At the top of one page was a subject line: VP announcement packet. Labor file must be clean by Friday. I read it twice. Then Paige whispered, "Cole thinks if he gets on that stage tomorrow, everyone will be too invested to pull him back." I looked through the windshield toward the plant. Somewhere inside, Tyler Boone was probably wondering if signing away his own pain was the only way to buy his mother's medicine. Somewhere inside, workers were still clocking in early and clocking out wrong. And my son-in-law was preparing to stand under bright lights and call it leadership. Paige wiped her eyes quickly, angry at herself for crying. "I'm not a hero, Mr. Clark." "I know." That seemed to surprise her. "I should have said something sooner." "Yes," I said. "You should have." She nodded, accepting it. That mattered. Then she pointed to the final page. "If this gets buried tonight, Susan Bell may never get the clean version from HR." I closed the folder. The cold air moved across the parking lot, carrying the distant thud of machines through the walls. For years, I had refused to use my name as a weapon. By midnight, I understood silence had become one. I drove straight from the south parking lot to Susan Bell's office. It was nearly 1 in the morning. Fort Wayne looked half asleep under the streetlights, but the industrial side of town never truly rested. Somewhere, trucks were still backing into docks. Somewhere, somebody was still punching in for a shift most people would never see. Susan's office sat above a small accounting firm near an old rail spur, not glamorous, not polished. Just clean, quiet, and lit by the kind of fluorescent lights that make every document look guilty. Mason Briggs was already there when I arrived. So was Susan. Neither of them asked why my hands were shaking when I put Paige's folder on the table. They already knew. Some nights, paper carries enough fear to speak for itself. Susan opened the folder first. Her face did not change as she read. That was how I knew it was bad. Attorneys only look surprised when the facts are weak. When facts are strong, they get still. Mason stood behind her with his arms crossed, watching each page land on the desk. The severance draft, the NDA language, the internal labor memo, the list of 31 names, the line that said, "Labor file must be clean before VP announcement." Susan read that sentence twice. Then she looked at me. "This is no longer just wage exposure." Mason's jaw tightened. "What is it?" "Retaliation risk, injury suppression, potential coercion. And if they were using severance to prevent a claim from being filed before an executive announcement, that is going to make every attorney in the room very awake." I sat down slowly. For the first time all night, my age caught up with me. 69 doesn't feel old when you are angry. It feels old when the anger finally has to become paperwork. Susan began sorting evidence into piles with surgical calm. Linda's records, Drew's logs, Tyler's injury documents, Paige's memo, the audit room exports, the payroll adjustments. Mason handed her his union grievance packet. She stopped him. "Before this goes anywhere, I need chain of custody clean. No emotion, no family history, no speeches." Then she looked directly at me. "If we do this tomorrow, Aaron, Cole will try to call it personal revenge." I nodded. "He already will. Then we make it impossible for him to be right." That was Susan. She could cut a room open with one sentence and somehow make everybody grateful for the precision. For nearly 2 hours, we worked. Printer trays emptied. Coffee went cold. Mason called 2 union stewards and told them to preserve witness statements but say nothing publicly yet. Susan drafted an emergency compliance notice. I signed an affidavit confirming how the badge access was used when I entered the archive room, who was present, and which records were exported. Every sentence had to be boring. That was important. Boring survives court better than anger does. At 3:14 a.m., Susan pulled a separate folder from her briefcase and placed it in front of Mason. He looked down at the title. Hawthorne Components / Clark Allied Systems. Equipment Service and Compliance Support Agreement. Mason's eyes narrowed. What is this? Susan turned one page. The contract Hawthorne relies on for certified maintenance tracking, audit retention, safety documentation support, and certain equipment service renewals. Mason looked at me. I did not look away. Susan continued. 5-year value, $18.6 million. The room went very quiet. Mason picked up the page slowly. You never mentioned this. No, I said. Why? Because some questions deserve the full truth. So I gave it to him. Because I have spent half my life trying not to be respected for the wrong reason. Mason studied me for a long moment. Not suspicious, exactly, but careful. Good. Workers need people around them who are careful with power. I continued. My wife Janet used to say, if people only respect you after they know what you own, they are not respecting you. They are respecting the danger. Susan's expression softened just slightly at Janet's name. Mason looked back down at the contract. So, Cole works under a plant that depends on systems your company controls. Not the plant itself, I said. And not the workers' jobs. That matters. Susan nodded. Clark Allied Systems cannot and should not punish the workforce. But the agreement gives Aaron authority to trigger independent compliance review, suspend specific leadership access to audit processes, and escalate findings to the Board Compliance Committee if there is evidence of safety documentation manipulation. Mason let out a slow breath. So, the man calling you old floor labor was standing on your compliance floor. I almost smiled. Almost. He was standing on people who trusted the paperwork to tell the truth. That was the part I cared about. Not Cole's embarrassment, not Diane's face when she learned, not Roy losing another joke before it left his mouth. The workers. The people whose names were sitting in stacks on that table because someone had decided their time, hands, and claims were cheaper than Cole's promotion. Susan slid another document across the desk. This also allows Clark Allied Systems to pause renewal of the Operations Compliance Module pending investigation. I knew what that meant. Pressure. Real pressure. But also danger. If we pause it wrong, I said, the plant feels it before Cole does. Susan nodded. Yes. Then we do not use the workers as leverage. Mason looked at me again. This time differently. I said it plainly. Cole does not get to hide behind their paychecks. We force the review. We protect the claims. We block retaliation. We do not shut down the line to prove I can. That was the moment Mason finally reached across the table and shook my hand. Not warmly, seriously. There is a difference. Near dawn, my phone buzzed. Jenna. I stared at her name longer than I should have. Then I answered. Dad? Her voice sounded broken. Nell showed me the video. I closed my eyes. The room around me seemed to dim. What video? Cole. At the dinner, talking to that vendor, saying men like you don't understand upstairs decisions. I didn't answer. Because there are moments when a father wants comfort from his child so badly, he almost forgets whether she has earned the right to give it. Jenna started crying. I should have stopped them. Yes, I said quietly. The honesty seemed to hit her harder than anger would have. I was scared, she whispered. I kept thinking if I corrected them in front of everyone, Cole would say I embarrassed him. Diane would turn cold. Roy would make it awkward. I thought silence would keep the peace. I looked at the table full of names. Tyler Boone, Linda Carver. 31 workers. 6 injury files. Jenna, I said, peace that requires someone else to become small is not peace. It is permission. She sobbed once. I'm sorry, Dad. I believe you. A small pause. But I don't need you to cry for me. I need you to stop being quiet when truth costs you comfort. That silence afterward was different. Not avoidance, impact. I understand, she said. I hoped she did, but hope is not proof. By 6:20 a.m., Susan had the final settlement summary drafted for review and announcement at the company reception later that day. It was not the full confidential file. It was the authorized summary workers had a right to hear. The first line sat at the top in clean black type. Wage restitution and safety settlement, $2.35 million. Below it were the numbers that would make Cole's celebration collapse. 31 workers owed back pay adjustments, 17 disciplinary records subject to reversal, 6 injury reports reopened. Tyler Boone's medical claim reinstatement recommended. Independent safety audit required within 90 days. Retaliatory severance agreements voided pending review. Cole Dutton removed from Labor Compliance Authority pending investigation. Then Susan found one more thread. She had been reviewing the VP announcement packet Page brought. At the bottom of the compensation page was a bonus provision. If labor exposure was cleared before promotion approval, Cole would receive a performance bonus of $186,000. Mason said nothing for several seconds. Then he muttered, "There it is." There it was. Not leadership, not efficiency, not hard decisions. Money. Cole had not just wanted the title. He had wanted the payout for making the problem disappear before anyone could name it. I stood and walked to the window. Morning had started spreading pale blue over Fort Wayne. Trucks moved along the service road toward the plant. Shift workers were already arriving, carrying lunches, coffee, tools, and the quiet bravery of people who keep showing up even when the room upstairs forgets they are human. For a moment, I thought about Janet. She would have hated the cruelty, but she would have understood the work. Susan came beside me and handed over the final folder. "If Mason reads this aloud today," she said, "Cole cannot walk onto that stage clean." I looked down at my factory badge. Scratched, faded. Still opening doors. Then I placed it on top of the settlement folder. Then today, I said, let the badge they laughed at introduce the truth they buried. The company reception was supposed to begin at 4. By 3:30, the front lobby of Hawthorne Components had already been dressed up to look more human than the plant usually felt. White tablecloths covered folding tables. A banner near the entrance read, "Celebrating Operational Leadership." There were trays of sandwiches, bottled water, cheap coffee, and small cupcakes with blue frosting that stained people's fingers. Executives like to decorate consequences before they arrive. Cole stood near the small platform in a dark suit, shaking hands like nothing in the world had changed overnight. Diane and Roy were beside him, polished and smiling, ready to admire the next step in the family's climb. Jenna stood farther back with Nell. My daughter saw me walk in. This time, she did not look away. That mattered. Not enough to heal everything, but enough for me to notice. I was wearing the same factory badge. Diane saw it first. Her mouth tightened. She leaned toward Roy and whispered something I couldn't hear. Roy glanced at the badge, then looked away too quickly to make a joke. Fear can educate manners very quickly. Cole noticed me last. For half a second, his face showed irritation, then calculation. Then that corporate smile returned. "Aaron," he said, walking toward me, "I didn't expect you here." "I know." He lowered his voice. "This isn't the place." I looked around the lobby. Workers lined the back wall. Union representatives stood near the side doors. HR people held folders against their chests like shields. Corporate guests talked softly, unaware that the room had been built over a fault line. "It is exactly the place," I said. Cole's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, Mason Briggs walked in, carrying the settlement folder. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. That made it worse for Cole. A man walking calmly with the truth is harder to stop than a man shouting with anger. The reception began with polite words from a regional vice president. He talked about efficiency, leadership pipelines, operational excellence, and the importance of adapting in difficult economic times. Every sentence sounded clean. Too clean. Then Cole was invited up. He stepped onto the small platform while people clapped. Diane clapped loudest. Roy gave a little whistle. Cole smiled, adjusted the microphone, and began. "I'm honored," he said. "This plant has shown what can happen when discipline meets vision." I watched Linda Carver standing near the back. She did not blink. Tyler Boone stood beside her, his hand still wrapped, his shoulders stiff like a young man trying to occupy less space than his own pain. Cole continued, "We made hard decisions. We protected the future. We proved that strong leadership means knowing where to cut waste." Waste. There it was again. That word had followed him from dinner to stage, but this time it had witnesses. When Cole finished, the vice president moved to hand him the plaque. Operational Excellence Award. Then Susan Bell stepped forward. "Before the award is finalized," she said calmly, "there is a required labor relations update." Cole's smile froze. The vice president looked confused. Mason Briggs walked onto the platform. He opened the folder. The room shifted. People can feel danger before they understand it. Mason adjusted his glasses and read the first line. Wage restitution and safety settlement, $2.35 million. Nobody moved. Not Diane, not Roy, not Cole. Mason continued. 31 workers identified for overtime adjustment and back pay review. A murmur moved through the workers near the wall. 17 disciplinary records subject to reversal. Cole looked toward HR. Nobody rescued him. 6 injury reports reopened for independent review. Tyler lowered his head. Linda placed one hand on his shoulder. Medical claim review for Tyler Boone reinstated pending corrected safety documentation. That was the moment Tyler looked up. Not at Cole. At me. I gave him the smallest nod I could. Mason read on. Retaliatory severance agreements voided pending review. Paige Dutton stood near the HR table, pale but still. She did not run. That counted for something. Independent safety audit required within 90 days. The vice president's face had turned the color of old paper. Then Mason read the line that broke the room open. Cole Dutton removed from Labor Compliance Authority pending investigation. Diane whispered, "No?" Just one word. Small. Useless. Cole stepped forward. "This is being misrepresented." Susan Bell turned to him. "No, Mr. Dutton. It is being summarized." That sentence landed harder than shouting. Cole looked at Mason, then at Susan, then at me. "You did this," he said. I walked forward slowly. Every eye in that lobby followed me. The badge clipped to my jacket suddenly felt heavier than it had in years. Cole pointed at me. "This is personal. This is a bitter old man trying to embarrass me in front of my company." For the first time, Jenna stepped forward. "No," she said. Cole turned sharply. Jenna's voice shook, but she did not stop. "You embarrassed yourself, and I let them laugh at my father once already. I'm not doing it again." Diane stared at her like she had slapped the family name off the wall. Roy opened his mouth. Jenna looked at him. "Don't." One word, but it changed the room. Susan opened a second folder. Clark Allied Systems has triggered independent compliance review under Section 14 of its agreement with Hawthorne Components. Cole's face twisted. "What does that have to do with him?" Susan looked at me. Controlling partner Aaron Clark authorized the review. The room went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not polite silence, not shocked silence. Rearranging silence. The kind that forces people to rebuild a man in their minds after they realize the version they mocked was incomplete. Diane's face drained. Roy looked at the floor. Cole stared at my badge as if it had grown teeth. I unclipped it from my jacket and placed it on the table beside the settlement folder. "You laughed because you thought this made me small," I said quietly. "You never asked what it still opened." Nobody spoke, so I looked at Cole. "You called them waste. You called it discipline. You called it leadership. But those hours belonged to people. Those reports belonged to injured hands. Those signatures belonged to workers who were scared because men like you learned how to make fear sound professional." Cole's mouth moved, but no words came out. Linda stepped forward from the back, her voice carried across the lobby. That badge fed more families than your title ever did. For a moment, I thought Diane might cry. Not from guilt, from humiliation. There is a difference. The vice president quietly removed the plaque from the podium. No speech, no ceremony. Just a man understanding that giving Cole an award now would look like signing the settlement in frosting. Mason closed the folder. The workers did not cheer. Real justice does not always make people clap. Sometimes it just lets them breathe for the first time in a long while. After the reception emptied into stunned little conversations, Cole caught me near the hallway outside the compliance office. His tie was loosened now. His face had lost all its polished confidence. "Are you going to take everything from me?" he asked. I looked through the glass wall toward the floor, where workers were still moving between machines, still doing the work that kept everyone upstairs paid. "No," I said. Cole waited. "I'm going to make sure you can't take from them anymore." For the first time, Cole understood I had never been beneath him. I had simply been standing where I could see what he stepped on. 6 months after the settlement was read aloud, Hawthorne components sounded different, not quieter. Factories are never quiet, but different. The machines still pressed, cut, lifted, and carried. Forklifts still beeped through the aisles. Men and women still came in before sunrise with coffee in one hand and worries in the other. But something had changed in the way people walked. A little straighter, maybe. A little less afraid to ask whether their hours had been counted right. That matters more than people upstairs understand. Cole Dutton did not become vice president. His bonus was suspended. His authority over labor compliance was removed, and he had to sit through outside ethics training with men and women who no longer looked at him like a rising leader. They looked at him like a warning. He was not dragged away in handcuffs. Real life rarely gives endings that clean. But he lost the thing he had protected more fiercely than people: control. Diane and Roy disappeared from my life almost completely after that reception. No more dinner invitations, no more polished insults. No more little jokes about my badge. I did not miss them. That may sound cold, but age teaches you something simple. Peace is not the same as revenge. Sometimes peace is just refusing to sit at tables where your dignity is served as entertainment. Jenna took longer. My daughter apologized more than once, but apologies are only the beginning when silence has done damage. So, I watched what she did after the words ended. She started showing up at worker meetings with reading materials for apprentices. She helped Tyler Boone with night class applications. She corrected Diane publicly the one time her mother-in-law tried calling the settlement Aaron's little stunt. That mattered, not enough to erase everything, but enough to open a small door. Tyler returned to work under a corrected safety plan. His medical claim was reopened. His disciplinary mark was removed. Later, he entered an apprenticeship program with hands still healing, but eyes steadier than before. Linda Carver joined the safety committee. Drew Miller kept his job and received whistleblower protection. Paige Dutton was transferred out of Cole's reporting chain. I never called her a hero. She waited too long. But in the end, she handed over the paper before it buried a young man. That counts for something. The settlement paid back wages to 31 workers. 17 disciplinary records were corrected. 6 injury reports were reopened. Those are numbers on paper. But behind every number was a kitchen table somewhere, a prescription bought on time, a car payment caught up, a mother sleeping easier because her son had not been blamed for a machine that failed him. That is what Cole never understood. Labor is never just labor. It is rent, food, medicine, school shoes, gas money, pride. And sometimes it is the only thing standing between a family and falling through the floor. By winter, we opened the Janet Clark Trades Learning Fund, tool vouchers, safety certifications, night classes, apprenticeship support. Janet would have loved that. She always believed a good trade could save a young person from feeling useless in a world that talks too much about titles and not enough about skill. At the opening of the new training room, Mason Briggs asked if I wanted to say a few words. I said no. Then Linda told me I was being stubborn, so I said a few. At the front of the room, inside a small glass case, was my old factory badge. Scratched plastic, faded photo, bent clip. Under it, a plaque read, "Respect the hands that keep the line moving." Tyler stood beside me after the ceremony and asked, "Mr. Clark, are you sure you want to leave it here?" I looked at that badge for a long moment. For years, I wore it because it opened doors. Then people laughed at it because they thought it proved I belonged beneath them. But they were wrong. A badge is not proof that a man is small. Sometimes it is proof that he remembers who power is supposed to protect. So I told Tyler, it opened the right door. Now, let it remind someone else not to close one. I still love my daughter. That did not stop. But love does not mean pretending betrayal never happened. I keep distance from the Duttons now. I keep my peace closer. I keep my promises to Janet closest of all. And when I think back to that dinner, I no longer hear the laughter first. I hear the silence after Mason opened that folder. The moment a room full of people finally understood what honest work had been carrying all along. Thank you for staying with me today and hearing this story all the way through. Please tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. And wherever life has taken you, never be ashamed of honest work. The hands that build, repair, cook, clean, drive, teach, and care for others deserve respect. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to subscribe to Final Act Revenge. Another story is waiting for you on your screen right now, and YouTube believes you'll enjoy it.